Welcome to Small Practice Support Information Session number 34. In this Law Society of Ireland recording, Gerard Rourke talks to Justin Purcell about developing a paperless office.
You're all very welcome to the Small Practice Information Session 34, Developing a Paperless Office with Gerard Rourke. And Gerard, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
So you're all very welcome here today. So if anybody wants to ask a question, we'll take it over the chat, but we'll get started now. So Gerard, you were educated at Trinity College Dublin and the King's Inns. You're a qualified barrister in June 2000, and you were called to the bar that September. And in October 2002, you put on a wig and spoke to your first judge in the circuit court.
Yeah.
And then more recently, you've set up the Paperless Academy. So what's all this about?
The Paperless Academy is designed to help lawyers go paperless, but it's grown out of the fact that I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided that I needed to take steps to be able to work without paper. And when COVID hit, I figured, first of all, I had a bit of time on my hands. And second of all, I figured a lot of people were going to need to know a little bit more about how to work without paper. So I built out this school and built lectures and software demonstrations and so on to try and help people on that journey. And that's effectively what it is.
And who is specifically targeting in the Paperless Academy? Is it just solicitors and barristers, or is it a wider group of people? And how?
Look, when I started, I was targeting everybody, because every single person on the planet, students, teachers, lawyers, my mum, my father-in-law have done the courses and they found them massively beneficial, and they're not lawyers. But more recently, I've decided that I really just have to focus on one area and try to do that well. So because I'm a lawyer and because I'm working on legal briefs all the time, going in and out of court, I know the challenges people are going to face when they think about going paperless. So I decided I'm just going to try and help lawyers. Hopefully anybody else who wants to have a look will benefit from it. But for the moment, I just want to help lawyers, solos and small practitioners and small offices to figure out how to go paperless and help them to do that.
And so what is paperless, if to the people coming on here who are the uninitiated, and why would they be interested in finding out about the paperless office other than the obvious?
Well, what's the obvious?
Well, I don't know. What do you mean by paperless then? Maybe could you, does that mean I never look at a paper or never hold a paper again? How do I do with other people who want to still interact with paper?
Okay, well, look, it's a good question. It doesn't mean no paper. It means less paper. It means trying to do what you can without printing things out. I mean, so much of the information that's available to us now is in digital format. A lot of our letters and so on get sent to us by email. Briefs can be sent by email. Court lists are available online. Statutes are available online. Textbooks are available online. Case reports are available online. It's all there. And the idea of printing it out when you have found it in digital format, printing it with a printer and having a physical copy that you then have to carry around with you, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's counterintuitive. So paperless, I suppose, is seizing those opportunities where information is already in digital format to keep it in digital format, but be able to work productively with it while it remains in digital format.
Okay, so that all sounds great in theory, but how do I get started? So I'm sitting here in my office, I've got paper everywhere. What should I do to get started to start managing my office in a more efficient manner or paperless manner?
Well, this is where I suppose individual requirements come in, and that's why I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to talk about their own situation to figure out how they could make a start, because it's making the start that's difficult. What I would generally advise on a very general level, if a solicitor working in an office, if you have a file, one case, that you notice there's a large amount of digital material being generated, be that correspondence passing over and back, or your client sending you copies of contracts or copies of letters or whatever, they're all coming in digitally. Just pick one file and make it a paperless file. So say to yourself, I'm not going to print any of this stuff out. I'm going to figure out how to work on it digitally. Everything else in your office can remain in paper form. This isn't something you can dive into with both feet and hope to do overnight. But try to make that one file your paperless file and start to experiment with the software that's available and to work on those documents digitally. And if there is any paper that's going with that file, scan it. And again, scanning is very, very simple. There's lots of ways to do that, but scan it in so that your whole file is digital and just start to experiment. It doesn't have to be stressful. It doesn't have to be overnight. And I would start that way. And as you become more comfortable, you might move on to another file, or you might spread it around the office a bit more.
Okay. And when you talk about a paperless brief, what do you mean by that? Do you want to just talk me through like the actual techniques of how that works? So you've something comes in and it's scanned in. Who does that, all that scanning? What type of machinery do you use? What type of software do you use then to collate it all together?
Well, I suppose that brings me back a little bit. There's software to collate it all together. There's software to mark it up. There's software to do various things with scanned briefs. And you've asked me who does the actual scanning. So I suppose one thing at a time. In terms of getting the digital briefs, it used to be the case that I would get nearly everything in paper format. But, and this is what changed my outlook, and most people will be familiar with this, in any case, when you're getting closer to the trial date, the other side tends to start sending you an awful lot of documentation. And I might be down in Galway High Court, staying in a hotel, when an email comes in with engineers' reports, actuary reports, consultants' reports. There might be 50 or 60 pages of those arriving into me by email, and I'm sitting in a hotel room. And I'm wondering, what am I supposed to do with this? And that's what started me, I suppose, on wanting to figure out how can I work on those documents without having to print them out. But nowadays, for me anyway, the vast majority of information is communicated to me electronically. And you asked, what is a paperless brief and what does it look like? And they come in a variety of different formats. Some paperless briefs come by way of email, and the email has 25 to 30 attachments. And those 25 to 30 attachments have generic names like scanned from a Xerox multifunction copier. I have no idea what they are. And when I open them, they're upside down or sideways. Now, that's going to take me a little bit more work to turn into a brief. It's still technically a paperless brief because there's no paper involved and all the documentation is digital. But at the other end of the spectrum is the brief that comes in. It's a single document. It might be a couple of hundred pages. It has a table of contents and it has bookmarks that allow me to jump to the specific document that I want to get to. And that's really what I want to end up with in every case. When I get a paper brief, which is rare nowadays, but when a paper brief comes in, I'll either have someone in my office scan it and shred it, or with COVID the way it is now, I'll have picked it up myself and I'll scan it in the home office and shred it there. So that's, I suppose, where the paperless brief comes from and how it comes to me.
Have you encountered any difficulties in doing that? You make it sound sort of quite simple and seamless, but I could just imagine a box of files or boxes of files. Yeah.
Well, you see, I suppose here's an example from just 2 weeks ago. I got a box of files, a box of ring binder, those large A4 ring binders. I think there were 4 of them in the box. And they were filled with recently punched, recently photocopied documentation. And I thought, if the solicitor has just photocopied this, then the likelihood is they have a copy that they can put through the photocopier. So I emailed them and asked them, do they have a digital copy? And 20 minutes later, I had all of that information in digital format uploaded directly to my website, and I was able to shred the paper. So sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it takes a bit more time. There would be other situations where that box has to be handed over to someone in my office and they're asked just to get it all scanned in. But when you've got a scanner with a feeder on top, it's really not that difficult. It's very, very straightforward. I can't really, I haven't encountered any major difficulties. The biggest problem I have is those comb bound briefs, the ones with the plastic spine that has several plastic pieces. The problem with those is when you take off the comb binder, the holes that have been punched into the paper tend to make the paper stick to itself. So when you put it into a document feeder, 2 or 3 pages can get pulled in at the same time. So I have an arrangement now with the solicitors who want to brief me with paper because they're not able to do it digitally, is I ask them, don't bind it. Yeah, we were saying it PDF SAM Basic, and the PDF annotation software is called Xodo, Xodo.
Okay, and so, and maybe we'll list them out to people later. So really what we're saying was you scan the information in, it arrives as a PDF file, and you want to talk us through why it should be a PDF file versus a Microsoft file? And
yeah, the PDF was designed to maintain the look of a document, no matter what device it's opened on. So as people will be aware, if you receive a PDF, you can open it on your smartphone, you can open it on your computer, you can open it with different PDF reading software. And no matter what device you open it on, no matter what software you use, it's going to look the same. If you try that with a Microsoft Word document, the layout of the document is going to change and the appearance of the document is going to change depending on various factors. Something as simple as if I create a document using a font that you don't have on your computer, Justin, and I email you that Word document and you open it, it's going to look different for you because you don't have the same font as I had. And this is, I've demonstrated this in one of the courses on Paperless Academy, but and you can see what's happening on screen. But even when your system substitutes virtually the same font, the characters in your font take up slightly different amount of space, and they're slightly taller, slightly smaller. So a 20-page document might be 20 pages on my system, and when you open it, it might be only 19. If there are images or anything like that in my document, when I send it to you, those images might be in different places on the page, and the layout starts to change. The beauty of PDF, I suppose, is that you can make markings on top of the PDF without affecting the underlying content. So you can highlight it without affecting the underlying content. You can make notes on it without affecting the underlying content. You try to do that in Microsoft Word, and again, the content starts to move around. So it's stable. PDF is much more stable for exchanging documents, and it's an international standard at this stage, and the document will look the same on any computer.
There's a question there about courts accepting PDF bundles. Is there any hope of that happening in the future?
I think so. The Court of Appeal issued a practice direction a few months back in which they gave specific instructions about how PDF booklets were to be made up. They talked about minimum resolution. They talked about inserting bookmarks and having tags for ease of navigation. And that demonstrated to me that they have an understanding of how they're going to need digital booklets to be put together in order for them to be workable. Not so much longer before that, we had practice directions from the High Court, Court of Appeal, the Supreme Court, and so on, saying that they wanted all written submissions submitted to them digitally. But one of the key parts of the practice direction was that the submissions had to be submitted in Microsoft Word format. And what that said to me was that they wanted to have a digital copy that they could copy and paste from, so that if there were specific submissions that were made to them that they found favor with or that they didn't like, they could easily transplant those into whatever judgment they were preparing. I couldn't see any other reason for asking for it in Microsoft Word. But I suppose the point is the Court of Appeal has issued a direction about PDF, and I can only hope that that trickles down to other courts and that the court staff and the judges start learning how to work with these, because they just make so much more sense.
Okay, I'm going to ask another question then about what's the best software to create a digital notebook? OneNote.
Yeah.
Okay.
OneNote. I don't think there's anything out there that's better. A lot of people talk about Evernote, but I've used that in the past, and it's nowhere near as good as OneNote.
Question here from where does Adobe fit in all this?
Adobe, the PDF format was invented by Adobe. Right? They started back in the 80s in a garage in California, as you'd expect, and out the back of the garage there was a creek called Adobe Creek, so they called it Adobe. They invented the PDF, and for a long time they were the only people who were able to supply software that could be used with a PDF. But I think in about 2008 the PDF was turned into an international standard, and it meant that anybody who wanted to make software to work with PDFs could do so. So Adobe fits in because they're the granddaddy of PDF. They know everything there is to know about it. They invented it. That's great. The problem, as I see it with Adobe at the moment, is that they have a free version, which is Adobe Acrobat DC. And the next step up from that is Adobe Acrobat DC Pro. And the comparison between the two, I won't go into it now. There's an article on the Paperless Academy website about why Adobe is not worth paying for, and you'll see all this information there. But fundamentally, if you want to use the additional features that you get with Pro, you've got to pay the guts of $300 a year for an individual, or $200 a year per person if you're rolling it out to a team. And that starts to mount up. And my attitude is, why pay for something that you can get for free and that has loads of features that you don't need? So that's, I suppose, where Adobe fits in. I don't think it's worth paying for. It's a great product, I've no doubt about that, with great features, but most of those features I don't need. I don't need to measure the circumference of a circle that appears on a PDF in front of me. I don't need PDFs that I can export to a movie making platform. So that's where it fits in, if that answers the question.
I think so. Yeah. So here's another question. If I'm going to court, and assuming you bring the brief and docs in a soft PDF format, do solicitors do this outside of where the file is saved within their case management system? Or do you save the file outside your CRM to read on a tablet, laptop, or do you access it by logging in CRM remotely? Now, I would have thought you should bring it outside the CRM because you might have connection issues, but I'll let you answer that yourself. Sorry.
Well, first of all, I don't use any case management system per se, other than what the structures that I've built myself in the office, because I don't really need one that badly. But from my understanding of case management systems, I think you're right, Justin. You don't want to be reliant on a connection. And
as we've just experienced. Anyway, let's not mention the war.
But I would imagine that, I mean, at some point in the process, you're going to have to generate a brief for somebody. Now, maybe you're going to a court that doesn't require counsel, and you're going to run the case yourself as the solicitor. I would still think it makes sense to put a brief together for yourself that you can work on, that you can annotate outside of your case management system. I think if you were to annotate it in the case management system, you're probably going to put annotations on your originals. And the next time you go to generate a brief from that file, you're going to be generating it with already annotated documents. And that's probably not ideal. I generally will work with a reasonably fresh brief each time I'm going to court for a different part of the case, because it makes more sense. I don't know anybody who keeps the same brief for 4 years while a case goes from initiation right through to trial. It needs to be freshened up as you go along.
Here's a question about conveyancing solicitor. How would they go paperless when dealing with original contracts and mortgage documentation, etc.?
Well, obviously, some documents have to be retained in their original format. But, I mean, one of those originals, I don't know exactly what has to be kept in a conveyancing practice because it's not my area, but let's take an example of a document that has to be kept in its physical format. If somebody wants a copy of that document, are you constantly getting the original out to make a copy of it? If you are, that's probably inefficient. You should have the original presumably stored somewhere secure and a copy available to you for reference purposes, and to furnish further copies to other people if they want them. The original probably has to change hands on a very limited number of occasions. So the paperless version of that is largely the same. You keep your original somewhere safe, but you have a paperless version of it, a digital copy of it, and that's your working copy. If you need to refer to the document, you use the paperless one. If somebody wants a copy of it, you can send them the paperless one. And when the time comes to actually exchange or inspect the original, well, you'll have to deal with that by getting it out.
Very good. So scan everything, then you've got a paperless or a digital version, and the items you need to keep, you put away in a safe place. The rest you shred. This moves on nicely to handing over cases. So, like, how does all that work? And you talked to me previously about a personal injury case, which is 30-page reports, etc. Like, so you're handing something over. You're receiving it. Is that?
Well, handing over a case for me and for any barrister, I think, involves identifying the person to whom it's going to be handed and then physically giving them the brief. And when I started going paperless, I had to kind of maintain a hybrid office where I had paperless briefs and I kept all of the physical copies as well, excuse me, in case a time came when I had to hand over the brief. I didn't think it would be fair to ask a colleague to accept a digital version of a large brief. So I kept the physical version, and when solicitors sent me updates, they would go onto the physical version, but also be scanned into the system. Now, that was a bit labor intensive and not ideal. With the changes that have come in with COVID, I think barristers generally have to be more receptive of digital briefs, because that's largely what solicitors are sending now. Barristers are having to start to learn to work with them. But when you think about a handover, if there's a handover between me and another barrister who is happy and comfortable working paperlessly, then it's a click or two of a button. The brief is transmitted. I had an occasion not so long ago where a senior who was leading me in a criminal case rang me to discuss an aspect of the case, and something had come up, but he said he wouldn't really be able to look at it until the following day, and he'd need to drive into town to his office to get the brief and bring it home to have a look at it. So I said, well, I can email it to you right now. And I did that. So that kind of speed and efficiency, it's not possible with paper briefs. So there is a tension there with handovers. I don't want to be the person who's asking an unwilling colleague to take a digital copy of a brief. But I've gotten to the stage now where solicitors are sending me digital briefs. And if it has to be handed over, what I generally do, if my colleague doesn't want a digital brief, is I ask them to contact the solicitor to request a paper brief. And usually solicitors can facilitate that without any difficulty.
Good. So just as one or two of the other big issues out there, cloud storage, where are you storing all of this information, and maybe some of the GDPR issues, because I know we're coming up to 1:25 and we have a limited amount of time, and there's a few other questions coming in as well. So
yeah,
without putting pressure on you, Jared.
No. Look, very briefly on the cloud storage, I use cloud storage. I use Microsoft OneDrive for Business, having satisfied myself that it's GDPR compliant. And that's one of the big issues if you're using cloud storage, and even when you're using email, is you need to know where the data is going when you put it in the cloud. Some of the free services will more likely than not transmit your data outside of the EU without any of the necessary protections in place. So that's a dangerous thing for a solicitor who's handling personal data and sometimes sensitive personal information. It's a dangerous thing to do. So if you're going to use cloud storage, just satisfy yourself that your data is going to be stored within the EU and that the right protections are in place for you as a data processor.
We're getting a couple of questions really around the transfer of large e-files or big briefings. How are you doing that, or what's the best way to do that? Is it OneDrive, SharePoint, or Outlook? Like, how are you sending these files?
If I need to send something very large, then I can share a link so that somebody else can access the place where that file is stored in the cloud, and they can download it at their convenience. If people are trying to send me briefs, I have set up a feature on my own website, which is at groark.ie, but there's basically, the website is only there because I need somewhere that solicitors can upload larger files. But it allows for those much larger files to be uploaded privately and in a GDPR compliant manner. And what it means is not only can I get briefs, but I can receive multimedia files, videos, photographs, recordings, all of that kind of stuff can be transmitted to me now. It's been the case that although I managed to go paperless, a lot of solicitors were still sending me CD-ROMs, which is what we commonly get in criminal cases. That might be where the CCTV footage is or whatever. But slowly I'm seeing a move towards simply uploading the file directly to me. So there's no CD-ROM involved. There's nothing like that involved. So that's how I receive them. And then sharing them is simply giving somebody else a sharing link with a password that they can use to download the file.
Okay, and we're still getting this question as where do we store physical letters, or if there's a failure in the digital storage system, do I need to keep a backup? So people are still sort of clinging on to, I need paper somewhere. It's like have you just got rid of paper in your life so far?
Yeah,
I know people are slagging me about all my books in the background there. You don't have any paper visible in your office, so like, did it take a while to kind of just move out, just get rid of the paper? You don't need it.
Yeah, look, it has taken a while. It's a transition, and it can be hard to let go of certain things. But I don't see why I need to keep certain documents in paper format. A digital copy is usually going to be as acceptable as anything else. The mention there of a letter that might need to be kept, well, I don't know if the letter is part of a course of dealing and needs to be kept because it goes to the construction of a contract that might be in dispute later on, and maybe you need a physical copy if there's going to be a dispute about whether it was ever written and whether it exists. But and that's a bit of a balance. But usually in a contract situation, you need a signed copy of the contract. So it's a case by case approach. But I mean, you take the example of a criminal case or a personal injury case. What documents are being generated in the course of that case that need to be retained in their original format? And the answer is virtually none that I can think of. Literally nothing. So I do appreciate that there are different areas. There's probate, there's conveyancing, there's maybe some of the contract negotiation type situations where originals will have to be kept. Solicitors will have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. Paperless means less paper. It doesn't mean no paper, so you're going to have to factor that in. But by getting rid of as much paper as you can, you start to open up new avenues to explore, and you start to create efficiencies that just don't exist with paper.
Listen, Jared, we're coming to the end of our time allocated. I just want to, and Patricia has brought up working with a great tip, working with the PDF booklets and paginating and inserting comments and notes is incredibly easy when you do the Paperless Academy course. It has vaulted me into the 21st century, as I was a slow starter when it came to IT. And maybe just before we go, I'll pull up your page that you very kindly offered to give everybody access to developing the paperless office. I don't know whether you can see that. I'm having a few technical difficulties. Let me just see whether I can share my screen and we can just show the actual bit itself. So,
yeah, I've been asked a lot of questions, I suppose, since starting Paperless Academy in March. I've been asked by a lot of people a variety of questions, but the same questions come up over and over again. So I've put together this ebook, which you can download from the website, that covers most of the topics we've dealt with today, but really deals with the most common questions that arise when people are thinking of going paperless. So it's available for free at the website. It's a download, and I hope people will have a look at it and find it useful. It should answer a lot of questions.
And if they need to contact you further, you're happy to take communication via the website.
Oh, absolutely. You can email me. There's a contact form on the website, and there's also, excuse me, there's also an automatic call scheduling facility on the website. So if there's a date and time that suits you to have a chat, you can pick that on the website and book a call, and we'll just have a chat on the phone and see where you're at, and I'll give you what help I can to get you where you want to go.
Okay, great. Listen, Jared, thanks a million, and really, really informative. Well, there's bits we haven't got to yet, which were the sort of outsourcing and automation. We'll have to have you back to talk further about your automated attendance and assistance. But I think you've been a world of knowledge, and I really encourage people to go and visit the website and find out more information about it. So next week, we've got the overview of the 9th annual survey with Mark Lowry on new strategies for a new era. So thanks very much, everybody, for coming to us, coming along today. We'll send out a recording of the session later this week. So hopefully we'll see you next week. Listen, Jared, thanks a million for everything today, and we look forward to talking to everybody next week.
Thanks for having me.